Oh yeah, that's why I got the piece of paper. So, when they grind these, okay, they have a wheel and it's cutting it, okay? Now, what happens is that material, that crank material, it is cut one way. So it's softened or shark finned one way, for lack of a better term. And why do you use the 600 or the 1500? It's to knock down those shark fins, those jagged teeth. So you got your crank journal, and you got your grinding wheel, and of course that's rotating, and your crank is rotating as well. And what happens is the surface, micro, if you look at it under a microscope, you're going to see what looks like a finish like this, and it's going one way. And what you're trying to do is just kind of knock down the high spots. Okay, it's not going to be perfect when you put it under a microscope, but it may do one of these after working it. So just keep that in mind. And I hope that helps someone. I know I wanted to hit something else about this, but can't seem to think about that right now. So oh yes, harmonic dampers. These go bad. Okay, they don't have to shift to go bad. These will go naturally bad over time because they're dampening all that harmonic, that vibration. And specifically, what had happened to the original crank in here, this went bad. Okay, it doesn't look bad, but it went bad. So that harmonic damper going bad like that, it chewed up the main bearings, and when you started it, it had great oil pressure. Get it running, get it warmed up, oil pressure dropped, it went to 0. Even if you revved it, it kind of went to like 10 psi maybe, but it went to 0. So, and only after it warmed up. So I popped the pan off, and I bought this Durango cheap for a song and dance actually. And even though it has 350,000 miles on it, it's got no rust. It's been a Georgia vehicle all its life. And anyways, I take the pan off, and it's got a brand new oil pump. And it's not a high volume, which of course you don't need a high volume, but it is a standard brand new oil pump. I think it's a Melling 72. And I'm like, oh, great. And I also noticed an oil pan gasket, of course. So they replaced the oil pump, so they thought it was an oil pump problem. And I was like, great, now what? So I got this engine, has a brand new oil pump, and it's got 0 oil pressure when it gets up to operating temperature. Next step, pull the main cap. And as soon I pulled the main cap, and I looked at it, and it was spun, and I was like, okay, this engine's toast. Well, not the engine's toast, but I'm going to have to do some work to it. And to regrind a crank, it was like $300. And again, hindsight 2020, I could have just polished it, got an oversized bearing for that journal, and been done with it. But I decided not to. And I was like, well, it's basically $100 for a stroker crank. And, well, might as well bore it. And, well, might as well this, might as well that. Next thing you know, I got a 408, and it became a project, and hopefully I see a couple people at the No Name Nationals. I don't predict me being there. I am trying to work towards going there, but I got 3 other projects in the building right now, and those are paying customers, so this comes second. If I happen to run across some free time, I go straight to working on this again, and I try and do what I can to work towards getting to the No Name Nationals. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. I wanted to hit on something else, but I think well, maybe I'll just do it now, and I'll just separate the video. So have you ever noticed where the oil holes are? Okay. They didn't just drill them in there because, you had access to drilling them. They actually had a plan. This is going along with what type of bearing to get. You got your half, you got your 3/4, and you got your full groove bearing. And, full groove bearings are okay. I don't like them because, one, that's a lot of oil being slung around. It's a lot of windage. You're going to need a high volume pump. The surface area is less on the load surface. Okay, and I know it's supposed to be, it's supposed to be like a riding on a cushion of oil, but your crank, like I said before, your crank flexes. Okay, so what you get is, you got your, I don't know where I was going with this, but that's that ADHD kicking in. Jeez. So anyways, so the full groove has a groove all the way around. Okay, so here's the top shell, and it's got a groove, and the bottom shell has a groove. Okay, I know, crude drawings, you get the drift. So as the crankshaft is rotating in that oil hole is traveling, with that groove. It's constantly being fed oil. Okay, if it's constantly being fed oil, guess where that oil's going? Right out of here. So you can imagine if that's a full groove and you constantly got an oil supply here, then that's creating more windage in the block around the crank. That's more oil being slung around. Now, going to the half, you got your top, but the bottom one is solid. You got your top. Let's just trying to write upside down here, so if I misspell it or it looks funky, that's why. So you got your top bearing, you got your groove with your oil hole, and here's your bottom. So what happens in this scenario is when the crank is rotating, it's only being fed oil in the top groove. Okay, so this oiling hole, when it comes exposed to the channel, it feeds oil. Okay, so during half the revolution, 180 degrees, it's being fed oil. The other 180 degrees, it's not being fed oil. So what does that do? Well, it creates less windage, yes. So this is actually pulsing oil, okay? Similar to, Mopar block, cam spinning, pulsing oil, to the rockers, or the oil passes through the head to the rocker shaft. So, and you're probably thinking to yourself, well, I'll just go full groove, you get more oil, whatever, who cares, Well, then, you got your surface area and the flexing of the crank and metal-to-metal contact, and you also got to look at, do you really need it? Do you really need that full groove? Why would you just, pulse it? You don't need constant oil here, okay? So you can imagine this, if your bearing is in the block, and you know what? Let me see if I can get a bearing. All right, king bearings. Now, can already see where that scuffed it. That's all right. All right, king bearings. These are half groove, and yeah, I did polish the surface. So if they look a little polished, then that's why. So if you can see that, I put that little notch in there, okay, just for oiling purposes. Does that help it or affect it in any way? I don't know. I tried it, and the only thing is, now hindsight, again, 2020. That's why you take these apart, put them together a couple of times. I'll probably next time when I get the new set of bearings in, I'll probably take this and put it to about right there, okay? I'll probably extend that groove right there. Extending it like that will make a tremendous difference, okay? And won't create that big of a windage problem. And I'll get to the 3/4 bearings here in a little bit. So you got this bearing, it's on here, you know, crank spinning around. Hey, oil hole. So oil goes in, and let's see what that one's feeding. This one is feeding, all right, it's going that way. So it's feeding that way. The oil hole's here, okay? All right, so this goes on here, da-da-da-da. This one is feeding right there, okay? This oil hole is traveling in this groove, all right? So from here to here, you're getting oil. All right, crank is spinning this way, all right? Start hitting the groove, okay? Where's the piston at? It's up in the bore. As it moves down, okay, this is your power stroke, okay? It is also your intake stroke. So this groove is feeding oil during the power and the intake side of the cycle. So all through that travel, all through that pressure, that pressure pushing down here, it's getting fed oil, okay? Like I said, they didn't just drill these, you know, to be just because nothing was in the way or whatever. They drilled these a certain way for a certain reason. That groove is feeding oil during the power stroke, okay? Not feeding oil. Notice how this one comes up. There's another oil hole because there's two, okay? This one feeds this over here. So this is getting exposed. Again, your power stroke or intake. It's pushing down. Oil's being fed constantly through that power stroke, okay? So that's that. When you get a 3/4 bearing, a 3/4 groove bearing, that groove extends through here, okay? That's probably a little much. It's more like that, okay? And what that does is, now what you're doing is when that oil hole gets through that half, that top half, it's going to continue to pressurize like that, okay? So now it's starting to, the piston is going up the bore now, okay? And that whole time, okay, from here, this is a 3/4 groove, okay? On this journal, from here to here, you're getting oil. On a half groove, let's go to the half groove. It's from here to here, okay? That's when it's getting pressure. On a full groove, it doesn't matter where you're getting it, it's constantly being fed oil. Constantly being fed oil. And you have many other holes that are constantly being fed oil. And that's why you need to run a high volume oil pump on a full groove, sometimes a 3/4 groove bearing. That's a lot more oil circulating and being suspended in your engine, creating a lot more windage, a lot more drag. That's why I don't do it. That's why I don't like 3/4 bearings. I wish they had something that stopped right there. But they don't. So what do you got to do? You take your file and you spend the whole day grinding that out, grinding it out. So now what I'm going to have is basically from, you know, it's straight up and down now. It's going to be from right there, okay? And the crank is rotating in the engine. There's your bottom, and there's your extra oil hole. Okay? So basically you have an oiling like this. Does that make sense? Okay? You put these two together. I hope that camera's showing that. Put these two together. Half oiling, or oils only half at a time. And you got your 3/4 groove, which is oiling 3/4 of the revolution. Your full groove, which is constantly being fed oil, constantly squirting out the connecting rod edges. And then there's what I want to do, what I kind of wish that they had, is just a little bit more. Just a little. I'm using the standard volume oil pump. The clearances in here are going to be 31 10,000ths or 32 10,000ths. And I think that's all I want to cover with this. I hope that helps someone. Maybe a little bit more understanding. And just for shits and giggles, let's do another one. Let's do this one. Okay, that oiling hole. Half groove. Oiling holes here. Gets oil through the power, through the power. Oiling groove ends. Non-groove bearing begins. Coming up. 3/4 bearing. Right there. It's right there. So the only time it's not getting oil is through there. That revolution right there. Half groove, it's getting oil from here to here. Half groove. Right there. Full groove, constantly being fed oil. Constantly being fed oil. Not stopping. Constantly creating drag. So, I sincerely hope that helps people in understanding a little more in depth about the crankshaft. There's other things that come into play, like why are these bigger than these? Okay, there's a reason for that. I'll just tap into it just a little bit. You have a V8, and depending on the firing of the V8, okay, so if you can imagine this, your V8's running, and you got high RPM. You ever spin a top, and the top is doing this? You know, when you're a little kid, I just dated myself, so you spin that metal top, it's got the painted metal, it got all kinds of graphics on it, and makes you dizzy or whatever, and that top is this, you know, it's doing this, and you try and move it, and it's resisting. Well, what happens is, due to the firing order of the V8, of the cylinders, of the orientation of the cylinders, of the angle of the cylinders, this isn't just spinning, okay? This crank is trying to do this, okay? It's swimming, all right? So not only do you have a crank doing this and trying to be distorted, but it's also trying to do this in your engine. That's what these do. See? 180 out from each other. And as you go towards the center, they get smaller. See? They get smaller and smaller. There's more to it than creating power from just a chemical in an engine. And engines are pretty simple, but there's a lot of technology that gets overlooked. And I hope I can bring some of that to light. And I sincerely hope this video helps people think a little bit more. That a rotating assembly is not just a rotating assembly. It has to coexist with a lot of other stuff. And crankshaft is a beautiful thing. I mean, look at it. It's gorgeous. I mean, I just think this stuff is beautiful. So, yeah, I think I'm ready to get to doing the other ones, and calling it a day for videoing. All right, I'll catch you on the flip.